Every few years, a talent competition produces a moment that genuinely stops the world. Sometimes it is a voice that defies all expectation. Sometimes it is a performer whose presence makes everyone in the room forget to breathe. In June 2018, America's Got Talent delivered one of those rare, unforgettable moments. A 13-year-old girl from a small town in England walked onto the stage and sang with a power and abandon that left judges, audience members, and millions of viewers around the world completely speechless. Her name was Courtney Hadwin, and within hours she was a global sensation. But the same fame that made her would eventually become one of the greatest burdens she had ever carried. The audition aired on June 12, 2018. Courtney walked onto the stage looking like any other nervous teenager, barely able to raise her voice above a whisper when the judges asked her questions. Mel B had to gently encourage her just to begin. She had chosen Otis Redding's Hard to Handle, a classic soul track that demands swagger and confidence, and what followed was nothing short of a transformation. The moment she opened her mouth, the shy girl disappeared entirely. Her voice was enormous, her movement electric, and her stage presence was unlike anything the judges had seen from someone her age. She dropped to her knees mid-performance, prompting Simon Cowell to mutter "bloody hell" under his breath. Howie Mandel immediately compared her to Janis Joplin. Mel B looked as though she could not believe what she was witnessing. When the song ended, the entire audience rose to its feet. Howie Mandel did not hesitate. He walked straight to the golden buzzer and pressed it, sending Courtney directly to the live shows. Backstage, he declared it was the most excited he had ever been, comparing her to previous Golden Buzzer recipients like Grace VanderWaal and Darcy Lynn Farmer, both of whom had gone on to win their respective seasons. The audition was broadcast to more than 11 million live viewers on NBC, but the real wave came online. Within 1 week, the video had been viewed over 130 million times across social media and streaming platforms. That number would eventually surpass 250 million, making it one of the most watched auditions in the show's history. Just like that, Courtney Hadwin was no longer a quiet teenager from County Durham. She was a phenomenon. As the season progressed, she continued to deliver. In the quarterfinals, she performed James Brown's "Papa's Got a Brand New Bag" and received standing ovations from all 4 judges. In the semifinals, she tackled Steppenwolf's "Born to Be Wild," complete with her signature high-pitched screams and wild, uninhibited movement. Simon Cowell described her as raw and messy, saying that watching her transform from a trembling teenager into something electrifying on stage was exactly why he loved her. Howie Mandel, once again, predicted she would win the entire competition. The audience agreed, voting her through to the finale, where she performed alongside rock band The Struts and closed with Janis Joplin's "Piece of My Heart." Everything pointed toward a historic victory. But when the results were announced, the unthinkable happened. Courtney Hadwin finished in 6th place. The winner was close-up magician Shin Lim. Witnesses at the Dolby Theater later described the collective gasp from the audience as deafening. Fans flooded Twitter in disbelief, calling the result absurd. The girl, who had been predicted to win from her very first audition, was sent home without a trophy. What came next, however, was even more devastating than the loss itself. Record deals arrived quickly. Simon Cowell, who had called her a lion on stage, partnered with Arista Records to sign her to a multi-album contract. The announcement came in December 2018, just months after the finale. Courtney was 14 years old and spoke openly about how excited and fortunate she felt. Cowell said he would never forget her first audition and that he was thrilled to be working closely with her going forward. But shortly before her 16th birthday, everything fell apart. Psycho Music, Cowell's label, began winding down its operations. Arista underwent its own structural changes. The deal that was supposed to launch her career collapsed entirely, leaving a teenager without a team, without a label, and without the support she had been promised. In interviews years later, Courtney described this period as one of the most difficult of her life. She said she constantly felt like she had to prove herself more and more every single day, and that the label collapse had actually left her in a harder position than before she had ever appeared on television. Rather than being given space to grow, she was pulled into writing camps with pop-leaning producers and songwriters who had no understanding of who she was. She was handed songs she could not relate to at all, music that felt like pure pop, which, in her own words, was simply not her. The music that had made Courtney famous was rooted in soul, blues, and rock and roll. She had discovered her musical identity through black and white YouTube videos of James Brown, Tina Turner, Etta James, and Aretha Franklin. The moment she saw James Brown performing I Got You, I Feel Good, she said she knew exactly what she wanted to do. But the industry had other ideas, and in trying to mold her into something more commercially palatable, they nearly erased the very thing that made her extraordinary. The turning point came when she was introduced to producer Kevin Bowe, whose credits included work with Etta James and Joe Cocker. For the first time, Courtney was working with someone who understood the music she loved. He encouraged her to actually write alongside him, to open up creatively in ways that no one had previously asked of her. Songwriting had never come naturally to her. Her priority had always been performance, being on stage, feeling that electricity, but something shifted through this collaboration, and gradually songwriting became something she could not imagine living without. She began working on her debut album when she was approximately 15 years old, writing song after song as a way of processing everything that was happening around her. That album, titled Little Miss Jagged, was finally released in September 2025, the product of nearly a decade of struggle, rejection, and creative rediscovery. While Courtney was quietly working to find her voice as an artist, the internet was doing everything in its power to strip it away. The same audiences who had watched her audition in awe began digging into her past. They discovered footage of her on The Voice Kids UK in 2017, where she had performed confidently without any sign of stage fright. They compared those clips to the trembling, barely speaking teenager on America's Got Talent and drew a conclusion that spread like wildfire across social media. They decided she was fake. The shy act, they claimed, had been a calculated performance designed to manufacture shock value. The accusations arrived fast and without mercy. Online commenters called her a fraud, questioned her integrity, and dismissed her as a manufactured persona. What they conveniently ignored was that America's Got Talent had no rule against prior competition experience, and that Courtney had hidden nothing. But on the internet, facts rarely matter as much as the narrative people choose to believe. Her grandfather, Tom Story, came to her defense publicly, explaining to the press that the family had chosen to enter the American competition deliberately, believing the United States audience would connect with her rock and roll energy more deeply than British audiences had. He was right about the reception, but nobody could have anticipated the cruelty that would follow. The bullying was not limited to anonymous strangers online either. Even at her school in Heselden, County Durham, classmates mocked her voice and taunted her. Her parents had feared precisely this outcome. They had known what the attention might bring, but when you are a teenager, there is no real protection from the people you see every day. Courtney handled the public criticism with a maturity that seemed far beyond her years, telling audiences after her elimination that she had learned not to dwell on negative comments and to focus on gratitude instead. Privately, however, she has since admitted that every hateful remark hit her deeply, sometimes making her question whether she wanted to be in the spotlight at all. Between 2019 and 2022, Courtney disappeared from public view almost entirely. She was between 15 and 18 years old during the stretch, navigating the collapse of her label deal, the suffocating writing camps, the online abuse, and the internal pressure of trying to figure out who she was as both an artist and a person. She did not quit music, but the world had largely moved on, and many of her fans assumed the worst. What she was actually doing during those years was writing constantly. She used songwriting as a diary, a way to process emotions she struggled to express out loud. She has said she was never good at talking about her feelings, so the songs became her therapy. The tracks she wrote during those years were not about fame or standing ovations. They were about what happened when all of it went away. Now, 21 years old, Courtney reflects on her teenage years with a clarity that is both striking and heartbreaking. She recognizes that being thrown into the global spotlight at 13, without the emotional tools or industry experience to navigate what followed, was extraordinarily difficult. She did not have a typical adolescence. She did not have quiet years away from cameras to figure out who she was. Instead, she had a television show that made her world famous, a record deal that crumbled, years of being told what to sound like, and the constant weight of having to justify her own existence as an artist. The pressure to remain frozen as the 13-year-old the world had fallen in love with followed her relentlessly. In interviews, she has described how people still only want to see her as that innocent little girl from the audition, and how exhausting it became to feel like growing up was somehow a betrayal of the people who had supported her. That feeling became the heart of one of her most powerful songs, You Only Love Me When I Lie, which explores the suffocating experience of pretending to be someone you are not, because the truth is too uncomfortable for the people around you. She has called it the rawest, most soulful track on the album, written out of pure frustration and sent to Kevin Bowe with the simple message that she needed to write about this. The music video was a deliberate statement of identity, showing her as the woman she had become rather than the child the world wanted to keep her as. The response was predictably painful. When she performed at Festival Vila in Portugal in June 2025, dressed in a bold, confident outfit that reflected her evolution as an artist, she received over 200 mocking messages in a single day. The same accusations of fakeness surfaced again. The same voices told her she was doing it wrong. But Courtney Hadwin kept going. She survived the label collapse, the identity crisis, the online cruelty, the school bullying, and years of an industry trying to turn her into someone unrecognizable. She found a collaborator who understood her. She wrote her own songs on her own terms. She released an album that she is genuinely proud of, one that carries the full weight of everything she has been through since she first stepped onto that stage as a terrified teenager. Little Miss Jagged is not a comeback record. It is the sound of someone who is never going to stop, no matter how many times the world tried to silence her. The title says everything. The path was jagged, uneven, and nothing like what anyone had promised. But she walked it anyway, and she walked it on her own terms.